Hi, I'm Lacey Kendall, just one of a group of great folks who are very proud to bring you this program, Education Insight, packed from top to bottom with local journalism every single week. Is local journalism dying in our Inland Empire? An expert on that joins us shortly. But first, a look at what folks are talking about in local education this week. Inland Empire teachers are watching as lawmakers push for a bill to give teachers 14 weeks of fully paid parental leave. Assembly Bill 2901 aims to have school districts cover the cost of the leave. Currently, most Californians can take 16 weeks of paid leave after having a baby, and that includes 8 weeks of disability leave and 8 weeks of family paid leave. However, teachers cannot access those benefits because they don't pay into state disability insurance. Instead, teachers must use their sick leave or vacation leave for time off after childbirth. The bill has passed the Assembly and is now in the Senate Appropriations Committee. We'll keep you posted. The San Bernardino Community College District secured a $3 million grant recently. Those funds came from the U.S. Economic Development Administration and will create a long-needed, cutting-edge job training center on the former Norton Air Force Base. The center will offer hands-on job training to the local community. It'll be a game changer, especially for unemployed adults and youth at risk. The center will also help those who are updating skills, including folks formerly incarcerated. The facility will span over 17,000 square feet and include indoor-outdoor training spaces. The project is expected to create 500 new jobs and retain over 800 existing ones. The new training programs will cover advanced manufacturing, construction, office skills, forklift operation, HVAC systems, tree care, and even forestry utilities. These industry-recognized programs aim to provide hands-on skills, as well as bringing new hope and opportunities to the inland region. As community newspapers and local radio news reports have decreased in the United States, experts are insisting that many areas here in California are becoming news deserts, areas where citizens know little about their community, local propositions, or their elected officials. Now, many are pointing to the Inland Empire as one of those deserts. So what does it mean when that happens?
We see more corruption and wasteful spending because you don't have reporters at zoning commission meetings. You don't have reporters at school board meetings or city council.
That's Dr. T.C. Corrigan, a CSUSB professor of communication. He coordinates the university's Local Journalism Partnerships Initiative, writes a Substack newsletter called Inland Empire Media Watch, and he is one of a growing group of professors and students who are banding together with local journalists and the Community Foundation to revive local media in the Inland Empire. Education Insights producer Alyssa Silva discussed that effort with him this week.
Dr. Corrigan, thanks for joining us on Education Insight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Across the country, there's been a growth in news deserts, communities without a reliable local news source. In your newsletter, you've argued that the Inland Empire is more of a news mirage. Could you explain why you prefer this term?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. So there's a lot of exciting research going on across the country, and a lot of it focuses on this concept of news deserts. So a news desert, like you mentioned, is a community without a reliable local news source. And we've seen the growth in these news deserts. Dr. Penny Abernathy at Northwestern University's Medill Local News Initiative they've been tracking the growth in these news deserts, especially as the advertising marketplace has really imploded over the last 2 decades. We've had a third of local newspapers across the country that have closed. Two-thirds of newspaper journalists have lost their jobs over the past 20 years. And as a result, there's roughly 70 million people across the country that live in communities that have either no local news sources or just one local news source, right? But if you look at some of those maps of news deserts across the country, the Inland Empire doesn't show up on them. According to Dr. Abernathy's research, between San Bernardino and Riverside counties, we have by her count 48 local news outlets, and actually, by my count, there's even more than that, right? But at the same time, when you actually start to look at those news outlets and the larger ecosystem more closely, you see that really, a news mirage is a better way to explain it. So one of the best illustrations of this is the daily newspapers in sort of the heart of the Inland Empire. So we're thinking here about the San Bernardino, Ontario, Riverside metro area, an area that's home to, 3+ million folks if you bring together all those municipalities. And, if you look at those daily newspapers, the San Bernardino Sun, Riverside Press Enterprise, Inland Valley Daily Bulletin, and the Redlands Daily Facts, their content is largely duplicative, right? So if you open up those newspapers, check out their front page, check out local news, check out their ads, even obituaries, it's duplicative every single day. It's the same content in all four of those newspapers. A little variation in the Redlands Daily Facts, but by and large, a lot of duplicative content. The mastheads change, but really everything else is the same. I like to think of it as basically one regional newspaper that's masquerading as four local ones, right? And I don't want to. This isn't meant to, demean the journalists who work in those, for those papers, but they're working for a hedge fund, effectively, Alden Global Capital, who has a notorious record for buying up local newspapers, slashing staff, and milking these publications for whatever profits are remaining. And in the Inland Empire, the way that looks is this news mirage dynamic, right? There are other facets, though, too, our local news mirage. One is that there's really, you can turn on local affiliate newscasts, your local ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, Telemundo, nightly newscast. But those aren't we don't have any dedicated local affiliates in the Inland Empire outside of the relatively small Palm Springs market. Everything else is part of the LA news market. And as a result, you've got newscasts that, have a local sort of framing to them, right? But they're not actually produced in the Inland Empire, right? And when those newscasts, are piped in from LA, much of the content that they're providing is, coverage of violent crimes, car crashes, this sort of stuff, that frankly is just of lower value in terms of creating an informed citizenry and participation in democratic politics, right? So, this is another important facet. The other thing that I, am really paying attention to a lot is what journalism scholars refer to as churnalism. So journalism is a dynamic where newspapers, other news outlets, they use prepackaged content. It might be press releases, it might be police reports, but because they've cut back so much on news gathering and reporting resources, these are sort of easy things to churn out on a day-to-day basis, right? And that might be good for sort of keeping costs low and attracting some audiences with some friend of the community sort of reporting, as you tend to find in press releases. But what it also does is it can hand over some editorial influence to politicians. It can hand over editorial influence to law enforcement and to major corporations, right? And we've seen this especially with Amazon. They've really effectively used these sort of journalism dynamics, right, to get their friend of the community face into the Inland Empire news agenda in a way that has really sort of made them seem a more positive player than some of these controversial dynamics, especially as Amazon warehouses have built out, as we've seen pollution rise, as we've seen housing unaffordability soar, right? And as we've seen some communities really struggling with being pushed out of their local areas, right? Especially communities that are poorer and people of color, right? And so these are issues that may not seem on its face to be associated with the news ecosystem, but when we look at journalism dynamics, they really become a little bit more problematic.
I know that your CSUSB team has spent the past several months meeting with local news outlets, including news websites, radio stations, and even bloggers who are still hanging on. Still, reporting accurately on the Inland Empire. Who are they? What have they told you about their experiences?
Yeah, so I think the early part of this conversation really paints kind of a dire and frustrating picture about local news. But there are really exciting things happening. There was a study a couple years ago by Listening Post Collective, who went and interviewed folks in the Inland Empire that are doing good journalistic work, and the person who runs Listening Post Collective, Jesse Hardman, he describes the Inland Empire as more of an information garden than a news desert. And I like that framing. It's really important for us to be able to identify folks that are doing good work and keeping their communities informed. Yeah, we've talked to lots of great journalists doing solid work. I'll just highlight a couple. Over at the Frontline Observer, which is a news website that focuses on labor and environmental justice issues. Anthony Victoria, who's a Cal Berkeley, California local news fellow. He is really producing excellent accountability journalism, investigative journalism, especially looking at warehouse development in the Bloomington area, as well as elsewhere around the Inland Empire. And I highly recommend checking out his work, sharing it. It's really important coverage about the impact of warehouse development in the Inland Empire and how it's affecting local communities. Frontline Observer has a media literacy project called Buzón del Barrio, the neighborhood mailbox. And we've got folks including Josue Emmanuel Munoz and Maravilla Giles, who are really doing important media literacy work in conjunction with Frontline Observer, because it's not just about creating quality news, it's about making sure that folks understand how to discern quality work from stuff that is, misinformation, sensationalism, that sort of stuff. So I can't recommend his stuff enough. I'd also, we've talked to Alicia Ramirez, has created a publication called the Riverside Record. I love the Riverside Record for its focus on public meetings coverage, right? So Alicia is covering city council meetings, covering zoning commission meetings, covering school board meetings, right? Using technological affordances like Zoom to make sure that she's got access to meetings, even when those are not, things that she can travel to. And it's just really, important coverage of stuff that matters, not just because it's, your tax dollars at work, right? But that these sorts of local issues are things that really affect everybody in a local community, right? And we've got publications that have been around a while. The Black Voice News has been around for 50 years, but they're doing, terrific work in terms of data journalism, in terms of, justice supporting journalism, right? Working with, for instance, mapping Black California to identify areas, for instance, where there are few places where folks can get fresh food, but where there are liquor stores in abundance, right? And that sort of use of data journalism to inform really quality reporting is stuff that Black Voice News does exceptionally well. So we've talked to a lot of folks in the in the Inland Empire news ecosystem. They're passionate about their work. They love what they do. But one of the common themes that we hear over and over from folks is that their staffs are limited, right? And they have to wear many hats, right? And especially when you're talking about some of these local news websites that are, maybe a 1 or 2 person operation. Yes, there's reporting that happens, but they also are publishers, right? They're also, making sure that they're bringing in readers and managing, reader databases, these sorts of things, and it's a lot of hats to wear. And they certainly struggle and have challenges with reach and growth. And these are things that we really need a whole of community response to try to amplify and support their work. I should mention one other local news outlet, and that's KVCR, public radio. Public radio infrastructure in the U.S. is just, I think it gets underappreciated for the value that it provides in terms of local journalism, but also amplifying really quality local stories. So I was mentioning Frontline Observer's work, and Anthony Victoria at Frontline Observer. is a California local news fellow at KVCR. And so that's sort of a place where he's able to take really quality investigative reporting from Frontline Observer and give it more the attention it deserves on the local public radio scene as well. So, and other folks at KVCR, Rick Dulock, Madison Ament, really doing great work there as well. So solid work being done, but again, limited staffs, challenges with reach and growth are issues that local news outlets face.
More of our discussion with Dr. T.C. Corrigan in just a moment. This is Education Insight. This is Education Insight. Today, discussing the movement by local journalists and broadcasters, educators, and the Community Foundation to bring back local Inland Empire journalism the way it used to be. Our guest is Dr. T.C. Corrigan, Professor of Communication for Cal State San Bernardino, the writer for Inland Empire Media Watch, and one of the growing team of locals working to actually bring journalism back. His conversation with our Alyssa Silva continues.
What's being done locally to support these local news operations?
Yeah, so probably one of the most exciting developments over the past couple years has been the launch of the Inland Empire Community Foundation's Journalism Innovation Hub Plus Fund. It's a mouthful, but it's all important, all of those words. So that Hub Plus Fund, they've been putting together a donor base over the past couple years, and also building on the work of the Inland Empire Media Roundtable that got started up around the census vote in 2020. And what they launched in June, and the launch event, which was at Esri headquarters in Redlands, really terrific event, and I think communicated the importance of supporting local journalism in the Inland Empire. The things that they want to do are really important. One thing that they're really focused on is building a cooperative newsroom, right? So a space where local journalists are able to collaborate together to produce and share news in a way that meets local communities' needs, but recognizing that staffs are thin at a lot of these local publications, this cooperative journalism model is really important for figuring out how do we take the limited resources that are here, produce solid journalism that folks in Inland Empire communities can benefit, get it to them, right? Amplify each other's work in the process. And you'll note the Inland Empire Journalism Innovation Hub Plus Fund, right, is not just this hub for cooperative journalism. It's also a local fund to support that work, right? And so what they're doing is they're building a local philanthropic base, but they've connected with Press Forward. Press Forward is a national coalition of major foundations across the country. You're talking about the MacArthur Foundation, the Knight Foundation, the Sloan Foundation, and others. And basically what they're doing is pooling together resources, and over the next 5 years, they're investing $500 million in local journalism. And what the Inland Empire Community Foundation has done is their Hub Plus Fund is a local chapter now of Press Forward, which is really important for getting the Inland Empire on that national map, right, of places that need support for local journalism, and creating that pipeline to make sure that local funds can be matched by national funds to be able to support local journalism in the Inland Empire. So really important initiative, really important project. And I'm just excited about that being able to support some of these cooperative journalism initiatives. I want to just mention one of them because I think it really illustrates the sort of collective impact that these projects can have. So over in Bloomington, which is a unincorporated community in San Bernardino County, a little southwest of the city of San Bernardino, Bloomington has a major development plan that is in operation right now, that is being created. And it is a plan that would that's going to result in the demolition of more than 100 homes, right? It's going to result in the demolition of an elementary school, and it's going to create a warehouse complex about 50 football fields in size, right? And so that, the journalist at the Frontline Observer that I was mentioning earlier, Anthony Victoria, he and a reporter at the Frontline Observer, Chris Salazar, they produced a really fascinating report called Pavement Politics that looks at the ways in which the developer for that project and other developers in the Inland Empire have given campaign donations to local politicians to sort of grease the wheels of these development projects for these big warehouse complexes. And it's a great report in its own right, but what I think is really important is sort of the cooperation and collaboration with other journalists and with community members and artists to be able to really get the most insight and impact from that report. So what Anthony and his team did, they worked with students at Pitzer College, political science students, to study campaign finance donations to be able to make sense of and analyze how these developers were influencing politics in the IE. They also worked with other media outlets, KVCR, Inland Empire Community News, so that when they published Pavement Politics, it was able to get more reach, right? Able to reach a wider swath of the Inland Empire community, because this isn't just a Bloomington story, right? These are issues that affect everybody in the Inland Empire, although a lot of the effects are sort of concentrated in these communities of color, like Bloomington.
You coordinate with CSUSB's Local Journalism Partnerships Initiative. What is that initiative? How did it get started? And how is it going? What are you hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, so this idea, it really started with a student in my Inland Empire News Ecosystems class, which I taught about 2 years ago. Her name is Stephanie Alfonso, and we were reviewing, research on local news ecosystems. We were looking into our own news ecosystem in that class. And we were reading some recommendations from Listening Post Collective in terms of, what should we do, right? What's the solution to some of these news desert and news mirage dynamics, right? And one of the recommendations was to create a local hub, right? A place where folks could come to create and to share and to tell, high quality journalistic stories. Now, the Inland Empire Journalism Innovation Hub Plus Fund, they're doing that, right? And they're doing great work. And I think it's something that we're excited to see happening and to support. What we've been thinking about over the past year, and we've gotten some seed funding from the university's CIRIS grant from the provost's office. I'm going to butcher the name of the actual name of that grant. Catalytic Investment for Research and Innovation Seed Fund, I believe is it. But we got some funding to basically spend time talking to local journalists and thinking about, what can CSUSB do in conjunction with the hub and other civic partners? What can we do to support local journalism, right? What is our unfair advantage, right, as an educational institution, the things that we do well that we can try to bring to this issue, right? Because it's not just gonna, we need more than just philanthropy. It's going to take policymakers, it's going to take local businesses, it's going to take civic and educational institutions. And we wanted to think through, what can we do? And so we've been talking to local journalists, and we've been identifying and brainstorming areas that we can, engage in partnerships, right? And so some of the areas that we've developed and we've started to create structures around include conducting local news research. There have been important studies done of the local news ecosystem. In 2021, Listening Post Collective produced this really important information ecosystem assessment. And I rely a lot on it in my classes and in my research. At the same time, things are changing fast, right? Things are developing fast. New news outlets are coming on board. Others are being bought by out-of-state owners, right? And so it's important for us to keep up with the keep up through research with the nature of our local news ecosystem, right? And so we're interested in producing an annual report that helps to make sense of and document on a baseline level, what's the state of local news research here in the Inland Empire, and then going forward, how is it evolving? How are these different initiatives, the Hub Plus Fund, some of the other things that we want to work on with local journalists, the cooperative journalism that's already being created and innovated with in the Inland Empire. What impact are those having on local communities, and how can we effectively document that? Because we think it's really important for not just for figuring out where the resources are best allocated and to what types of projects, which communities are not being covered effectively, but also to be able to communicate that to policymakers, to foundations, right, to the community itself, to advertisers, right, to be able to make sure that everyone understands the needs of local journalism in the Inland Empire, right? So local news research is one important part. We think there are opportunities for innovative storytelling that we want to support local journalists with, right? We have, a student newspaper here at CSUSB, the Coyote Chronicle, and they've been working to extend their reach out into the community. Not that campus coverage is unimportant, it very much is, but we recognize that there are needs to cover local stories, and the faculty advisor there, Greg Gonway, he's been working with the Center for Community News at the University of Vermont to be able to extend the Coyote Chronicle's reach into the community. And we're interested in partnering with local news media to be able to make those that work of students out in the community more impactful for them, more impactful for community members through local news and student media collaborations.
Well, then, we certainly wish your team and your community partners luck in this important effort, and we'd love to have you back for a progress report. Dr. Corrigan, we appreciate you speaking with us today.
Thank you so much.
Cell phones are soon leaving our Inland Empire classrooms, at least while class is in session. What do local educators and parents and the kids holding those cell phones have to say about it? We'll have that and so much more next week on Education Insight. I'm Lacey Kendall. Have a great week.
Education Insight is produced in partnership with KVCR San Bernardino.
Our executive producer is Jacob Poor.
And our production engineer is Tyler Veazey.
Special thanks to Alyssa Silva for her reporting.
And Lacey Kendall is your host.
Support is provided by College Futures Foundation.
Some technical assistance provided by the College of Arts and Letters at Cal State San Bernardino.
Growing Inland Achievement. Working together for inland education and economic success.
Join us again next week for Education Insight.